7 days on the hugely popular Trek rail. How does it stack up? How does it trail ride? How does it downhill? That's what we're going to find out, riders. That's what we're going to find out. Riders, welcome back to Sam's Bikes, where you know we only talk e-bikes, and today it's 7 days on the Trek rail, 5 rides, 220 Ks, so much to talk about, riders. The Trek rail is a beast of a bike. I really enjoyed my time. So the format of this video is, first we're going to talk about the bike, because you guessed it, it's not a stock Trek rail. I've made a few changes. Then we're going to go POV style out in the trails and talk about how it actually rides. And then we're going to go back in the studio and analyze all the details and give it a yay or a nay from Sam's Bikes. So the bike is a Trek Rail 9.5 that retails for 6,000 euros. i9 wheels front and back, i9 stem, and clearly Schwalbe tires, Magic Mary front, Big Betty back. And riders, a massive shout out to Schwalbe, because they are the official sponsor of Sam's Bikes, and they do really help make all these videos possible. So massive shout out to those guys. And we've got Magura MT7 brakes, really enjoying that, halfway through my long-term test. We go on death grips, we go on my Renthal aluminium bars. What else we got? We got Sam Hill, flat pedals. So yeah, lots of goodies on this bike, and it's definitely not a stock Trek rail. And you know, I kind of get a bit of hate about changing all the parts on bikes, but you know, I haven't changed the geometry of the bike. Still running 29s, it's still 160, 150, and I'm excited to get into this test and to see if the Trek rail really does stack up to one of those really popular bikes over the last 18 months. So let's get into it. All right, so I've had the Trek rail for 7 days, and a massive shout out to Iago, my mate who lent it to me. He actually bought it from my recommendation, and he's loving it, and he's pimped it out, as you can see. And the Trek rail has been a bike I've wanted to get on for at least a year now. I really like the geometry for a 29er with that short chainstay, and has it disappointed? No way. I mean, I'm riding the base model Trek 7 with the carbon fiber frame. So 160, 150, and I find it quite an agile bike for a 29er. We got a 64.5 degree head tube angle and a 446 mil chainstay in the high setting. And you know, when I say that line between enduro and trail bikes is blurring, it's definitely blurring, because this is kind of mixing geo numbers of an enduro bike with suspension numbers of a trail bike. You definitely feel that when you're going downhill. I feel pretty confident on it. Not as confident as something like the Kenevo with 170. But you know, something I do like with the suspension kinematics or the suspension design is it's kind of got a bottomless feeling, which gives me confidence to smash into things, because you're not getting a big bottom out clunk when you do bottom it out. And this is rolling the Yaris, which have a new charger, and the RockShox Deluxe at the back. Look, I would love to see this bike with some Zebs and an X2, and Iago's actually ordered that. So I'd love to try the bike once he gets the suspension, because I haven't really been that impressed with the suspension. It's kind of, you're not getting much small bump compliance. You're getting a lot of chatter. But on the bigger stuff, it does suck it up. It has to, it's suspension. But small bump, not so good. So let's go through. Downhill's good. What about jumping? Well, because the suspension's not giving you that much small bump, it's quite poppy, so it jumps really well. Maybe a little bit harsh on the landing, but saying that, it's also pretty good on not giving you that harsh bottom out. I am bottoming it out, but I don't really notice I'm bottoming it out. This is pretty rocky, man. All right, so we're dropping into the last downhill. We hate saying that for the day. We got a little lost, but let's talk about how the bike climbs. Okay, so it's a 29er. You've got 160 at the front, 150 at the back, so I'll put you in a good sitting position. It goes downhill pretty well, it's pretty steep here. Hanging that back wheel out. You've also got, yeah, a 436 chainstay, which is not super long, so it still makes the bike pretty playful, but it also climbs pretty well. I'd have to say on a 29er, I reckon 443, 446, somewhere around that is a pretty sweet spot. All right, so now let's talk about the motor, because it is an e-bike after all. And I've been really impressed. You know, it's kind of embarrassing I haven't spent that much time on the Bosch, and this has been the longest time I've spent on it. And I'm really impressed with the Bosch. It's got loads of torque. I'm gonna say it's probably close to the most powerful. I really enjoyed the low and high torque. So when you're going up a hill, and if you don't get the gears right and you sort of, oh, this is pretty choppy. Whoa, 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 whoa. So if you don't get the gears right, you can just have some, you know, low torque like a big diesel and just power up and not change the gears, which is really good, which saves your gears. And, you know, because you don't need to change under power, which I really like that. Probably the worst thing I noticed about the motor, it does have the same rattle as the Shimano EP8. I would say it's as prominent as the Shimano, maybe a little worse, but I am riding a carbon frame here. I have done a range test. You will see the range test in the top icon on the right. I'm pretty pro these days. Yeah, the range was really impressive. We got like something like just under 80 Ks and 1500 meters of vertical climbing from a 620 watt battery. Super impressive. Something I didn't like also was as it starts off, it's probably not the smoothest motor to start off. It's a bit jerky, where the Shimano and the Bros is a smoother sort of engagement. I also didn't, when you got over that limiter, that 25K limiter, the disengagement was pretty good. And it doesn't seem to drag that much. I don't even know where the line is here. And it doesn't seem to drag that much when you get over the limiter, and also when you're pedaling off when the motor's off. So motor's good, definitely rate it. And appearance, it's a good looking bike, the Trek Rail. I like that it's got a low standover height. That's something I really like in an e-bike. You know, BMX background and all. And all right, we're down the mountain now. We're probably gonna go grab a beer and something to eat. And I'm gonna analyze the data, and I'm gonna go back into the studio, and I'm just gonna do my conclusion now. Okay, riders, I've had 10 days to think about the Trek Rail, and I was really impressed. The first thing I noticed was, okay, I've been testing the Kenevo SL for about, I reckon, 3 weeks back to back, and then getting on the Trek Rail. Well, after 2 days of riding, I did 230 Ks in 5 days. I had sores on sores. You know, my whole body was aching. It's not a really light bike. I didn't weigh it, but I reckon it's around 24 kilos the way I had it set up. But really impressed with the bike, and I was riding a large with a reach of 465 centimeters, and I found the sizing really good. It was one of those bikes you could just get on, and it felt nice straight out of the box. You know, it could be a little bit longer, but I'm 183 centimeters, and I reckon if you're around there, the large is a good spot to go. And now a few things I didn't really like about the rail. I didn't like that the water bottle holder was a little bit too high up in the triangle. Like, I couldn't fit a 600 ml water bottle and my tube above it. So I'd like to see that coming down a little bit, 2 centimeters. But you know, Trek probably did that so it was more versatile to put a bigger shock in if you wanted to. And also the whole integration of the Bosch system with the Kiox display. For me, it's kind of a little bit like, let's say the Specialized Gen 3 is like having an iMac. The Trek Rail is like having an old 90s desktop with cables everywhere. It's not very clean. I think overall the motor was fantastic, but the integration needs a lot of work. And those remotes, you know, Rob Rides talks about it a lot. They are so ugly. I don't know how anyone could actually design anything more ugly than that. And the key in the battery, like, no one's gonna leave a 7,000 euro bike outside where someone's gonna steal the battery. So it makes a lot more sense to me to use an Allen key, because you could be out in a trail in the middle of nowhere and the bike freezes. And you know, these are like little computers, and who's done it before? You know, their laptop's frozen and you take the battery out and reset it. So if you don't have that key, you're not gonna be able to reset it. So I just see that as a really pointless thing. Definitely one of the standouts for me was the range. The Bosch Gen 4 with a 625 watt battery is getting pretty much the same range as the Specialized Gen 3 with a 700, which is really impressive. And I really like the motor overall. The clunking sound is not a deal breaker for me because I know where that sound's coming from, so that's not a problem. Definitely a really good motor, and you know, Bosch is coming up. You know, this is a Gen 4. Really impressive. They need to work on the integration, but really impressed with the motor. And this is a personal gripe, and it probably won't annoy that many people, but it has like this turning lock. I mean, it's to save the frame so you don't scratch the frame, but it means you can't turn the handlebars fully. And when I put the bikes in the camper van, I need to turn the handlebars fully. So at the moment on the weekend, I was over the Gen 3 and the Kenevo and actually put Bayer's bike in the back. So we had 3 bikes in the back. With the Trek Rail, I could only get 2 bikes because I really can't turn those handlebars. It is kind of crap you can't tune the Bosch Gen 4 motor. Like, you do have the automatic mode, the EMTB mode, which is really good and it worked really well, and I was really impressed with that. I personally would like to see that in the next generation or even a firmware update. And as reported, the rear axle does come loose. For me, it was like 2 or 3 times each ride I had to check it and tighten it up. And now the million-dollar question, would I buy a Trek Rail? I'm gonna say yes if I didn't have to put it in my camper van, which is a bit of a deal breaker. But it's a fantastic bike and a really good price from a powerhouse like Trek. You know, it is pretty well spec'd and pretty well priced. And if it was me, I would go for the Trek Rail 5 with either a 500 or a 625. You know, if you're gonna do less than 2.5 hours of riding, a 500 is gonna be absolutely fine because the range on a Bosch is really good. And my good mate Brett actually bought a Trek Rail 5 about a year ago, and check out this build. Brett has been having a lot of fun building this bike over the last year, and it's really well spec'd now, and it's so good to see Brett out riding again. He has had like a sabbatical of like 15 years. It hasn't been on a bike. We used to ride together in London and LA, and it's just really good to see him riding again. So definitely I don't see any problem whatsoever with the aluminium frame. And I actually have done a video of how I would build out my Trek Rail, quite similar to Brett's build, but check it out in the link above. And the final thoughts, definitely the Trek Rail gets a thumbs up from Sam's Bikes. It's a really good bike, and it's great to see Trek finally entering the e-bike market with a good bike. It's been a while, they were late to the party. And you know, the Trek Rail is a confident trail bike that's got kind of geometry settings of an enduro bike, which would see you pretty comfortable at a bike park or doing some long backcountry rides. So it's quite a versatile bike and definitely a great option in 2021. And riders, I hope you enjoyed the 5 days on the Trek Rail. It was a lot of work. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, share it with like-minded people. It really does mean a lot. And stay safe out there, and I'm gonna see you next week.